The woman at the diner knew how I take my coffee. I hadn't ordered yet. I'd walked in, sat down at the counter, and she set a cup in front of me. Black, 1 sugar, and moved on to the next customer without looking at me twice, like she'd done it 1,000 times. I'd never been to that town before. I'd never been in that diner. I'd never seen that woman. But she poured my coffee exactly right, and when I tried to flag her down to ask about it, she just smiled and said, "You want the eggs too, or just coffee today?" I hadn't said a word. I need to go back, way back, because this doesn't start in that diner. It starts in the kitchen of a brick ranch house in Xenia, Ohio, in 1997, when I was 15 years old and my father said something to me that I memorized without meaning to. We were sitting at the table. He was paying bills. I was doing homework. Geometry, I think. The television was on in the other room. It was a Thursday in October. I remember these details because the moment felt so ordinary that the strangeness of what he said printed itself against the backdrop like ink on clean paper. He put down his pen, looked at me, and said, "When you start driving, you're going to look at maps, and when you do, you're going to see a road that runs through the bottom of the state. Route 78. It runs east through MacArthur and cuts down toward the river through Morgan and Noble counties. You might think it's a shortcut. You might think it saves time. Don't take it. Don't take it even once. You go around." I looked up from my homework. Why? Because I'm telling you not to. That's not a reason. It's the only one you need. That was my father, Gerald Lance. He was a purchasing manager for a manufacturing company in Dayton. He was exact, organized, and quiet. He didn't tell stories. He didn't give warnings without cause. He also didn't explain himself. In 2 years of knowing him, that moment was the only time he ever told me to avoid something without giving a rational, practical reason. I filed it away the way teenagers file things, loosely, without urgency. I didn't have a car yet. I didn't have anywhere to go. Route 78 was an abstraction, a gray line on a map I hadn't looked at. But I didn't forget. My name is Brendan Lance. I grew up in Xenia, which is a small city east of Dayton, big enough to have a Walmart and a movie theater, small enough that you knew most people at the gas station by sight. My mother, Diana, was an office manager for a dental practice. She was warm and organized and completely uninterested in anything mysterious. Our household ran on routines, early dinners, and practical thinking. My father was from somewhere else. He'd moved to Xenia in 1979, the year he turned 21. He met my mother at a church social, married her in 1980, and settled into a life so thoroughly ordinary that you'd think he'd been born into it. But he hadn't. And when I was young, I noticed the gaps. There were no photographs of his childhood. None. My mother's side had albums going back 3 generations, picnics, holidays, school portraits. My father's history began in 1979. Before that, nothing. He said he was from down south in the state. When pressed, he'd say near the river, which in Ohio could mean anything along a 200-mile stretch. He never named a town. He had no family that visited, no old friends who called. On holidays, it was always my mother's people, her parents, her sister, her cousins. Once, when I was about 12, I asked him directly, "Dad, where exactly are you from?" He was fixing a lawnmower in the garage. He didn't look up. "A place that doesn't exist anymore," he said. "What do you mean?" "I mean it doesn't matter. I live here now." He said it the way you'd close a cabinet, firmly, done. My mother, when I asked her privately, said he'd come from a very small community that wasn't good for him, and that he'd left as a young man and preferred not to discuss it. She said this in a tone that made clear the subject was finished, not forbidden, finished. I got my license in 1998. I bought a used Chevy S10 pickup with money from my job at a hardware store. I drove it everywhere, to school, to friends' houses, to the state park on weekends. I was a teenager with a truck, and I felt the exact kind of freedom that came with that. I did look at maps. My father was right about that. I kept an Ohio road atlas in the glove box, and I'd study it the way some people study sports statistics. Not because I was going anywhere specific, but because I liked knowing how places connected. The logic of roads appealed to me. Shortest path, alternate routes, bypasses, and I noticed Route 78. It ran from a junction east of MacArthur through a series of small towns in the hilly southeastern corner of the state, Morgan, Noble, and the fringes of Washington County. On the map, it was clearly the most direct path between several points. If you were heading to Marietta or anywhere along the Ohio River from central Ohio, Route 78 saved at least 40 minutes compared to the northern route through Zanesville. I remembered my father's warning. I didn't understand it, but I was 17 and had no reason to drive to the southeastern corner of the state, so it was a moot point. For 6 more years, it stayed moot. In 2004, I was 22. I'd graduated from Wright State with a degree in geography. Ironic, I know, and taken a job with a regional planning commission based in Lancaster that did land use assessments for rural counties. The work involved driving to small communities, documenting zoning issues, photographing properties, and interviewing local officials about development plans. It was tedious, low-paid, and required a lot of windshield time on back roads. I liked it. In my first year, my assignments were all in Fairfield and Hocking counties, close to the office, manageable drives. But in late September 2004, my supervisor handed me a new project. 3 townships in Noble County needed land use reviews as part of a state grant application. The fieldwork would take 4 days. I looked at the map. The fastest route from Lancaster went south to MacArthur, and then east on Route 78 through Morgan County into Noble. I sat at my desk for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and called my father. "Hey, Dad, I've got a work assignment in Noble County." "Okay, 4 seconds. 5. Take 70 east to 77 south," he said. "It adds time, but it's a better road. It adds an hour and a half, so leave earlier." "Dad, I have to be on site by 8 in the morning. The county coordinator is meeting me. I can't then stay overnight somewhere along 77 the night before. There are motels in Cambridge. That's a $60 motel for no reason. I'll pay for the motel." I paused. This was not like my father. Gerald Lance did not offer to pay for things to avoid conversations. He didn't negotiate around obstacles. He addressed them directly, solved them, and moved on. "What's on Route 78? I asked. "Nothing you need to see." "Is it dangerous?" "No." "Then what?" "Brendan, please." It was the please that almost stopped me. My father did not say please as a request. He said it as a last measure, the way you'd press your hand flat against a door that was about to open. "I'll think about it," I said. "Take 77, he said, and he hung up. I took 78. I left Lancaster at 5:30 in the morning on a Tuesday in early October. The sun wasn't up yet. I drove south on 33 to Nelsonville, then picked up the route heading east through the hill country. The road was 2 lanes, well-maintained, winding through hardwood forest that was just beginning to turn. It was beautiful, the kind of drive that makes you understand why people romanticize rural Ohio. The hills rolling one into the next, the mist in the hollows, the light coming through the canopy in long amber columns. I saw nothing unusual. No ominous signs, no strange landmarks, just road, trees, sky. After about 40 minutes, I entered Morgan County. The terrain got steeper. The towns, if you could call them that, appeared every 10 or 15 miles. A cluster of houses, a church, a volunteer fire department. Then nothing for a while. At around 6:45, I needed coffee. My thermos was empty and I'd passed nothing open for miles. Then, around a bend, I saw a small building set back from the road with a gravel lot and a hand-lettered sign. Ruth's. 2 trucks were parked outside. The windows were lit. I pulled in. Ruth's was not a restaurant in any official sense. It was someone's converted front room. 6 tables, a counter with stools, a kitchen visible through a doorway. The walls were wood-paneled and hung with old photographs, group shots, farming scenes, church picnics. The air smelled like bacon and coffee and something baked. 2 men sat at a table near the window, both older, both in work clothes. They glanced at me when I came in, then went back to their food. A woman stood behind the counter. She was mid-50s, solid build, dark hair with gray at the temples. reading glasses pushed up on her head. She was wiping the counter with a cloth. I sat on a stool. "Morning," I said. "Morning, hun." She turned to the coffee maker and poured a cup. Set it in front of me. Black, 1 sugar. I stared at it. "I didn't order yet," I said. She looked at me over the glasses, not confused, not startled, more like she was recalculating something. "Oh, I'm sorry. How do you take it?" "Black, 1 sugar." She moved on, started plating something in the kitchen. I sat with the coffee and told myself it was a coincidence. Most men who came into a place like this at 6:45 in the morning probably took their coffee black. The sugar was a guess, a 50-50 shot. It meant nothing. I drank the coffee. It was good. "You want the eggs too, or just coffee today?" "Just coffee." She nodded. Then, without looking at me, she said, "You're heading through to Noble. Work assignment. Roads are good this week. The bridge on Olive is still out, though. You'll want to go around through Harrietsville." "Your dad ever tell you about Harrietsville?" I set the cup down. "What? Just making conversation. Lot of people from around here, their families go way back. Thought maybe yours did too." "Why would you think that?" Full, direct eye contact. The smile was easy, natural. The kind of smile that belongs to a woman who has run a diner for 30 years and knows how to make anyone comfortable. "You've got a familiar look," she said. "That's all." I paid for the coffee. She wouldn't tell me a price. Said to leave what I thought was fair, and drove the rest of the way to Noble County. My appointments went fine. I met the county coordinator, a man named Bill Akers, at the township hall in Caldwell. We drove to 3 sites. I took photographs and measurements. He told me about drainage issues and setback violations. Normal work. But I kept thinking about the diner, not the coffee. I'd rationalized that. It was the other thing. The question about my father. The word familiar. At lunch, Bill and I ate sandwiches in his truck outside a township building. "Bill, do you know a place called Ruth's? Little diner on 78 Morgan County side?" "Sure. Ruth Calder's place. Been there forever." "Is she from around there originally?" "Ruth? Oh yeah. Her people are Calders and Weatherbys. They've been in that hollow since before the county was organized." "Why?" She said I looked familiar. Bill shrugged. "You probably look like somebody's cousin. Everyone out there looks like somebody's cousin. It's a small gene pool, if I'm being honest." He laughed. I laughed. We finished lunch. That afternoon, driving between sites, I asked Bill a question that had been forming in the back of my mind. "Are there any communities along 78 that are particularly close-knit? Like unusually insular?" Bill chewed his lip. Thought about it. "There's a few. Depends on what you mean by insular. Most of those little places along the ridge are pretty self-contained. They've got their churches, their family networks. Some of them don't interact much with the county government at all. We send tax assessments, and they pay them. That's about the extent of the relationship." "Any one place in particular?" "Well," he said slowly, "there's Furnace Creek. That's down in the hollow between Morgan and Noble, right along 78. Census says about 200 people, but honestly, I don't think anyone's done a real count in years. They've got their own school. Well, they call it a school. And a store. And they kind of handle their own business." "What do you mean, handle their own business?" "I mean, if someone in Furnace Creek has a problem, they don't call the sheriff. They sort it out themselves. Not in a bad way, far as I know. There's just a structure there. Old families running things the way they always have. Weatherbys, mostly. And Sellerses. And," he paused, "Calders. Like Ruth. Ruth Calder. Yeah. She'd be connected to that group. Though she's out on the highway, so she's more, I don't know, public-facing. Yeah. Like the rest of them, you don't really see. They're back in the hollow. You wouldn't know they were there unless you turned off 78 onto the county road that goes in. There's no sign or anything, just a road." That night, I stayed at a motel in Caldwell. I spread my road atlas on the bed and found Furnace Creek. It wasn't labeled on the map, but Bill had described the location precisely. A county road branching south off 78 about 2 miles past Ruth's Diner, running along a creek bed into a narrow valley. I stared at the map. Then I called my father. Dad, what's Furnace Creek? He didn't answer immediately, but I could hear him. I could hear the quality of his silence, the stillness of a man who has just heard something he's been waiting decades to hear. Where did you hear that name? He said. I'm in Noble County. For work. I drove 78. I asked you not to. I know. What's Furnace Creek? Brendan, is that where you're from? Nothing. 10 seconds. 15. I heard a chair creak. He was sitting down. Yes, he said. That single word carried more weight than anything he'd ever said to me. It was an admission that cost him something physical. I could hear it in his breathing afterward. Heavier, deliberate, the breathing of a man who has just set down something he's been carrying. Who are the Weatherbys? I asked. Where did you? A county coordinator. He told me about the families there. Weatherbys, Sellerses, Calders, those are the families. What does that mean? It means those are the 3 families that have been in Furnace Creek since it was founded, before the Civil War. They built everything there. They run everything. The store, the church, the school. They own the land. All of it. That's not unusual for small rural. Listen to me. His voice sharpened. Not to anger, to focus. Those families don't just live there. They operate there. Like a machine. Everyone has a role. Everyone has a function. And the functions don't retire. They don't disappear. When someone gets old or dies or leaves, the function passes to the next person. And if there isn't a next person in the direct line, they find one. Find one how? They wait. They keep track. They know who left and where they went and what their children are doing. They maintain the information the way you'd maintain a property, because to them it is property. Every person who was born there belongs to a role, and the role belongs to the community, and the community does not let go. Dad, you left in 1979. I left. The role didn't. What role? He didn't answer that. Dad, what role? The person who handles the exterior, roads, bridges, boundaries. The person who interfaces between Furnace Creek and the outside. Every generation has one. Someone who understands systems. Someone who can talk to county officials and state agencies and make sure the community stays undisturbed. I felt something cold settle at the base of my skull. I'm a land use planner, I said. I know. I work with county and state agencies. I know, Brendan. Did they? I stopped. Reformulated. Did someone arrange for me to get this assignment? I don't know. I don't think they arrange things directly. I think they create conditions. They have patience that you cannot imagine. They will wait 20, 30, 40 years for something to align, and when it does, they treat it as confirmation, as proof that the role is seeking its person. That's insane. I know how it sounds. No. I mean, that's actually delusional thinking. That's a community with a shared delusion. But their roads are maintained. Their properties are in order. Their children are educated. They've existed as a self-sustaining community for 160 years without significant external intervention. You can call it delusional, but it works. And things that work have a gravity to them. They pull. I finished my Noble County assessments the next day. I had 2 more sites to visit, both accessible from Caldwell without going near Route 78. I did the work, completed my reports, and packed up the truck. But on the morning of my last day, instead of heading north to Lancaster, I drove west on 78. I don't know entirely why. That's not true. I do know. I wanted to see it. The actual place. The hollow where my father grew up. The community he'd fled. I wanted to see it in daylight, in my work truck, with my clipboard and my state credentials, because I believed, genuinely believed, that seeing it would make it ordinary, that the thing I was afraid of was the mystery, not the place. I passed Ruth's diner. She was visible through the window, moving behind the counter. I didn't stop. 2 miles later, I saw it. A county road branching left off 78, heading south into a notch between 2 steep hills. No sign, no mailbox, just a road, paved but narrow, descending into shadow where the trees closed overhead. I turned onto it. The road followed a creek. The hollow was steep-sided and quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't empty but full, the quiet of a place where sound is absorbed by density of growth. After about half a mile, the road crossed a low bridge, and the valley opened slightly. Houses appeared, not clustered, but spaced along the road at regular intervals. Modest frame houses, well-maintained, with gardens and outbuildings. Laundry on lines, chickens in a yard, a tractor parked beside a barn. It looked pastoral, peaceful, exactly what you'd expect of a small Appalachian community that time had gently passed by. The road ended at a wide spot, not a square exactly, but a natural gathering point where the valley widened enough for several buildings. There was a store, a church, white frame, small steeple, a long low building that might have been the school Bill mentioned, and a larger house set back from the road behind a stone wall, 2 stories, with a deep porch. I parked near the store, got out. The air smelled like wood smoke and cut grass. Somewhere, someone was running a saw, the high clean sound of a table saw cutting lumber. A dog trotted across the road without looking at me. A man came out of the store. He was about my age, mid-20s, stocky, with a sunburned face and a cap that said Ohio Farmers on it. He leaned against the doorframe and looked at me with a friendliness that seemed genuine. "Morning," he said. "Morning? Looking for someone." "Just passing through." He nodded, smiled. "Not a lot of through traffic down here. Road doesn't go anywhere but back to 78. "I know. I'm with the Regional Planning Commission, doing some surveys in the area." "Surveys." He said it the way you'd repeat a word in a foreign language. Not skeptical, just tasting it. "Well, you're welcome to look around. You want coffee? My aunt's got a pot on." "Who's your aunt?" "Marlene Sellers. She runs the store." "Sellers, one of the 3 families." "Sure," I said. "Coffee sounds good." Inside the store, a woman was stacking jars of preserved vegetables on a shelf. She was maybe 60, small, with silver hair pinned back, and an apron over a plain dress. She turned when we came in and looked at me, and her face did something I've never forgotten. It opened. That's the only word I have for it. Her expression shifted from neutral to something that was not surprise, not pleasure, but recognition. Deep, structural recognition, like seeing a piece of furniture returned to the room it was built for. "Oh," she said, softly, almost to herself. "This is," the young man began. "I know who it is," she said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she turned back to the shelf and continued stacking jars. "Coffee's in the back," she said. "Help yourself. Cups are on the hook." I looked at the young man. He shrugged cheerfully. "She's like that," he said. "Knows everyone. She doesn't know me." "Well," he said, "she seems to think she does." I poured coffee. Black, 1 sugar. I'd stopped questioning this. I stood in the back of the store, which doubled as a kind of sitting area. A few chairs, a table, a radio playing low. Through the window, I could see the large house behind the stone wall. 2 people were on the porch. An older man in a chair, a woman standing beside him, leaning on the railing. "That's the Weatherby house," the young man said. He'd followed me back. "The main one, anyway." "Who lives there?" "Ellis Weatherby. I guess you'd say he's the senior member. And his daughter, June. She manages most of the day-to-day now." "Ellis is 81. Manages what, exactly?" The young man looked at me. His friendliness didn't waver, but something in his eyes shifted, a slight focusing, like a lens adjusting. "The community," he said. "Land decisions, disputes, resource allocation. Somebody's got to do it. Like a mayor. More like," he thought about it, "more like a foreman. You know how a foreman on a job site doesn't own the company, but keeps everything moving. Like that. Except it's been the same family doing it since before anyone here can remember. And everyone's okay with that? Why wouldn't we be? It works." He said this without defensiveness, without any need to convince. He said it the way you'd say that water flows downhill. I should have left then. I had my observations. I had the image, peaceful hollow, organized community, old families, functional structure. I could have driven back to 78, gone home, and told my father that I'd seen it and it was just a small town with outdated social dynamics. Nothing sinister, nothing to fear. But Marlene Sellers had said, "I know who it is." And I needed to understand what she meant. I walked across the road to the store counter where Marlene was working. "Ma'am, earlier you said you knew who I was." She didn't look up. "You've got Gerald's walk," she said. "Same walk. Same way of standing in a doorway like you're deciding whether the room deserves you. You knew my father. Everyone knew Gerald. He went by Gerald here." Now she looked up. A slight crease between her brows. "That's his name, isn't it?" "Yes, but I stopped. My father had told me he'd changed his name when he left. Was that not true? Or had he changed it, then changed it back? Or had he never changed it at all, and the story he told was just another layer of the wall he built?" "He left in 79, Marlene said. "November. Cold night. Ellis's father, Warren, he was running things then. Warren said Gerald would be back within the year. He wasn't. Warren said 5 years. He wasn't. Warren died in 1991, and on his deathbed, he told Ellis to keep the function open, so Ellis did. The function, the exterior function, the person who handles the boundary. Roads, agencies, outside contact. It's been empty since your father left. We're patient." She said this the way Ruth at the diner had said, "You've got a familiar look." Without weight, without agenda, as a simple statement of fact so deeply held that it required no emphasis. "Ma'am, with respect, my father left because he didn't want to be part of this. He chose to leave. People leave, that's part of it. Some come back, some don't. But the function stays, and eventually, someone fills it. I'm not going to fill it." It was warm. It was the warmest smile I'd received in Furnace Creek. "I didn't ask you to," she said. "You drove down here yourself." I left the store and stood in the road. The saw had stopped. The valley was quiet except for birds and the creek. The two people on the Weatherby porch, Ellis and June, were watching me. Not staring, just watching the way you'd watch weather approaching from a distance. I got in my truck, started the engine. Then June Weatherby came off the porch. She walked across the road and across the gravel lot and stopped about 10 feet from my window. She was maybe 40. Dark hair, strong face. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt and work boots, and she carried herself with the kind of authority that doesn't need announcement. "You're Brendan," she said. I didn't ask how she knew. It seemed pointless. "Yes, I'm June. My father would like to meet you, if you have a few minutes." "I was just leaving." "I know, but he's 82. 1. He doesn't have a lot of few minutes left." I turned off the engine. The Weatherby house was clean, old, and organized. The furniture was heavy, dark wood, upholstered chairs, a grandfather clock in the hallway that ticked with the authority of a heartbeat. Photographs lined the stairway wall, group portraits spanning what appeared to be 100 years, each one taken in front of the same house, the same porch. The people changed, the structure didn't. Ellis Weatherby sat in a chair by a window in the front room. He was thin, white-haired, with hands that rested on the arms of the chair like they'd been placed there by someone concerned with symmetry. His eyes were sharp and pale. June brought a chair for me and set it across from him. She left the room. Ellis looked at me for a long time. It was not uncomfortable. It was assessing. He was reading me the way a contractor reads a foundation, checking for soundness. "You look like Gerald," he said, "in the shoulders." Gerald had good shoulders, built for work. Everyone keeps telling me I look like him. Because it matters here. Resemblance isn't vanity, it's continuity. "Mr. Weatherby, Ellis. Ellis. My father left this place nearly 30 years ago. He changed his life completely. He has a career, a home, a family. He doesn't talk about Furnace Creek. He doesn't want to be connected to it." "I know. Then why does everyone here act like he's still part of this?" Ellis adjusted his hands on the armrests. A slight movement, precisely executed. "Do you know what a function is, Brendan?" My father used that word. He said each person here has a function. Not a job, not a title, a function. Like a beam in a house. A beam doesn't choose to bear weight. It bears weight because of what it is and where it was placed. If you remove a beam, the house doesn't forget it. The house has a space where the beam was. And the space exerts a pressure. It pulls. People aren't beams. No, people are more complicated. They resist. They run. They build other houses and try to forget that the first house is still standing with a space in it. But the space doesn't care about any of that. The space just is. Ellis, I'm a land use planner. I took a wrong turn and ended up in your town. That's all this is. He smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen in Furnace Creek. Not warm, not cold, but knowing. The smile of a man who has watched this specific conversation play out before. Maybe many times. Your father said something similar. In 1978, he said he was just a kid who wanted to go to college. He said the function was just a word people used to keep him here. He said he didn't believe in it. He was right, maybe. But he spent the rest of his life avoiding one road. He spent 30 years not coming back. And the first time someone from his line drives through, not because we invited him, not because we arranged it, but because the work brought him here. It's someone who does the exact thing the function requires. Boundaries, roads, interfaces with outside systems. He paused. Let it sit. I don't need to convince you of anything, Brendan. I'm 81. I've said what I'll say. But I want you to notice something. You drove past this town. You could have kept going. You didn't. You turned onto our road. You parked. You got out. You walked into the store, drank the coffee, asked the questions, came to this house, and sat in that chair. Nobody made you do any of that. He leaned forward slightly. The space pulse, he said. That's all it does. It doesn't chase. It doesn't threaten. It just pulls. And some people feel it, and some don't. Your father felt it every day of his life. That's why he ran. I drove out of Furnace Creek and back to Route 78 at 11 in the morning. The drive to Lancaster took 2 hours. I did the work. I filed the reports. I went home. That night, I sat in my apartment and replayed every moment. The coffee, Marlene's face, Ellis's hands on the armrests, the word function used over and over by different people in different contexts with the same unshakable certainty. I called my father. I went to Furnace Creek. Silence. I met Ellis Weatherby. More silence. Dad, he talked about a function, an exterior function. He said it's been empty since you left. My father's voice, when it came, was flat. What else? He said the space pulls. He said that's why you ran. Ellis always did have a way of making captivity sound like physics. Is he wrong? About what? About any of it. The function. The way they track people. The waiting. No, he's not wrong about the facts. He's wrong about what the facts mean. They think it's natural. They think people return because the role calls them. But it's not natural. It's maintained. They maintain it. Every card they send, every quiet inquiry, every time Ruth or Marlene or whoever recognizes someone's face, that's not the universe pulling. That's a system operating. And the system is very, very good at looking like fate. He paused. Brendan, did anyone ask you to stay? No, not directly. They won't. They never do. That's the rule. The person has to choose. The person has to walk in, sit down, and say yes. If they push, it doesn't count. It has to be voluntary. That's what makes it, in their minds, legitimate. So, they just wait. They wait. They create the conditions. They let the gravity do the work. And they are never, ever in a hurry. I didn't go back to Furnace Creek. Not that month. Not that year. But something had changed in my head. Something structural. It's hard to describe without sounding dramatic, but I'll try. Before Furnace Creek, my life in Lancaster felt complete. Sufficient. I had my job, my routines, my apartment, my plans. After Furnace Creek, the same life felt like it was sitting slightly off-center. Not wrong, just displaced. Like a picture hanging 1 degree from level. You can't always see it, but you can feel it, and once you feel it, you can't stop. I started driving differently, not toward Furnace Creek. I kept my promise to my father and stayed away from 78. But I noticed I was drawn to back roads, county roads, the kind of narrow, winding routes that connect small communities to smaller ones. I told myself it was professional curiosity, land use planning, understanding the rural infrastructure. But I was looking for something. I didn't know what. Over the next several years, things happened. Small things. Cumulative. In 2006, I received a Christmas card at my apartment, no return address. Inside, a simple message in neat handwriting. Hope you're well. The creek's high this year. Unsigned. In 2008, I was promoted to senior planner. The week after the promotion, I found a note in my office mailbox. Not the mail, the internal office mailbox. It said, "Congratulations. You were always suited for this." No signature. I asked everyone in the office. No one knew anything about it. In 2009, I married a woman named Sarah. She was an elementary school teacher from Circleville. We'd met at a friend's wedding. 3 days after our wedding, we received a gift, a hand-stitched quilt, mailed in brown paper, no return address. Sarah thought it was beautiful. I recognized the pattern. I'd seen the same pattern on a quilt draped over a chair in Ellis Weatherby's front room. I never told Sarah about Furnace Creek. I couldn't figure out how to explain it without sounding unwell. In 2011, my father had a stroke. Minor, the doctors said, but it slowed him. He moved from the house in Xenia to an assisted living facility in Beaver Creek. I visited every Sunday. We talked about baseball, the weather, my job. We did not talk about Furnace Creek until one Sunday in March 2012, when he brought it up himself. "I want to tell you something," he said, "and I want you to just listen." I nodded. When I was 18, Warren Weatherby called me to his house. He sat me down in the same room where you sat with Ellis, and he explained the function to me, not in vague terms, in detail. He told me exactly what the exterior person does. They attend county meetings. They file paperwork to keep the community compliant with state regulations. They manage the road maintenance contracts. They handle any interaction between Furnace Creek and the outside world. They are the membrane. He said the word membrane with particular precision, like he'd been thinking about it for years. Warren told me I'd been identified for this function when I was 12. He said they'd been watching how I interacted with people outside the hollow, teachers, the mail carrier, the propane delivery driver. He said I had a facility for it, a naturalness. He said the function doesn't just require skill, it requires a specific kind of temperament, the ability to exist in two worlds without being fully of either one. He looked at me. He was describing me perfectly, and that's what scared me. Not that he was wrong, that he was right. That they had watched me for 6 years and understood something about me that I barely understood about myself, and they wanted to use it. I left because I realized that if I stayed, I would eventually agree, not because they forced me, because they were right. I was suited for it, and the longer I stayed, the more natural it would feel, and the more the choice would seem like it had always been mine. That's how the system works, Brendan. It doesn't coerce. It clarifies. It shows you the shape of yourself and then shows you the space that matches, and then it waits for you to step into it. He was quiet for a while. I spent my whole life in Xenia being a purchasing manager. I was fine at it, competent, but it never fit the way they said the function would fit. And some nights I'd lie awake and think, what if they were right? What if I ran from the only thing I was actually made for? His eyes were wet. That's the worst part, he said. Not the fear, the doubt. My father died on April 3rd, 2014, heart failure. He was 56. I handled the arrangements, cleaned out his apartment at the assisted living facility, packed his clothes, his books, his few personal items. In the nightstand drawer, I found a box, small, wooden, latched but not locked. Inside were letters, dozens of them, handwritten on plain paper, in the same neat handwriting as the Christmas card and the congratulations note, and, I assumed, every other piece of correspondence that had arrived from Furnace Creek over the decades. They were all from Ellis Weatherby. They were not threatening. They were not manipulative, at least not in any way I could point to. They were updates. News from the Hollow. The creek flooded in '88. The store got a new roof in '93. June had a daughter in '95. The schoolteacher retired in 2001 and was replaced by a seller's girl who'd studied in Athens. And at the end of every letter, the same line. The function remains open. No pressure, no timeline, just information. There were 42 letters, one for every year since my father left. The last one was dated January 2014, 3 months before he died. Gerald, I'm not well. I expect this will be my last letter. I want you to know that I never held your leaving against you. You were right to choose. That's how it works. But I hope you'll understand that the function doesn't close with me just as it didn't close with you. June will continue, and the space will remain for whoever is ready. Your friend, despite everything, Ellis Weatherby, died in 2015. I found out because a notice appeared in the Athens Messenger, a small obituary, 3 lines, listing him as a lifelong resident of Morgan County and a community leader. June Weatherby was listed as his surviving daughter. I didn't attend the funeral, but that fall I received a letter at my home in Lancaster. Same handwriting. No, different handwriting. Neater. More angular. June's. Dear Brendan, my father spoke of you and Gerald often. He respected your father's choice, and he respects yours. I want you to know that nothing has changed, and nothing needs to change. We are here. The function is open. If you ever want to visit, you are welcome. The road is the same road. June, I need to describe what happened to my marriage, not because it's directly connected, but because it's part of the shape of things. Sarah and I were happy for 6 years. Then we weren't. The reasons were ordinary. Different priorities. Different ideas about where to live, whether to have children. She wanted to move to Columbus. I couldn't explain why I needed to stay in Lancaster, closer to the southeastern part of the state. I couldn't explain it because I didn't fully understand it myself. I just knew that every time she showed me apartment listings in Dublin or Westerville, something in my chest tightened, as if I were being pulled further from something I needed to stay near. We divorced in 2016. Amicable. No children. She moved to Columbus. I stayed. That same year, I was offered a position as the regional planning director for a 3-county area that included, I am not making this up, Morgan County. I could have said no. There were other positions, other regions. I said yes. In 2018, I drove Route 78 for the first time in 14 years. It was a professional obligation. I had a meeting with the Morgan County Commissioners about a zoning variance. The meeting was in McConnellsville, the county seat, which is north of 78. I didn't need to take 78 at all, but I was already on it before I realized I'd chosen it. Not dramatically, not in a trance. I simply took the turn that felt most natural, and by the time I registered which road I was on, I was 20 minutes in. I passed Ruth's Diner. It was still there. The sign looked newer. Through the window, I could see a woman behind the counter. I couldn't tell if it was Ruth. I passed the unmarked county road that led to Furnace Creek. I slowed down. I didn't turn, but I slowed down, and as I did, I saw something at the junction that hadn't been there in 2004. A mailbox. Standard rural mailbox. On a post. It had a name stenciled on the side. Lantes. My name. My father's name. Stenciled on a mailbox at the entrance to a community we hadn't lived in for nearly 40 years. I pulled over, got out, walked to the mailbox, opened it. Inside was a single envelope. Unsealed. My name, Brendan Lance, written on the front. Inside, a note in June's handwriting. We had a feeling you'd be through here again soon. Coffee's always on. No expectations. The function is patient. I closed the mailbox. I got in my truck. I drove to my meeting. That night, in my motel in McConnellsville, I sat on the bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to apply everything I knew. My education, my rationality, my understanding of sociology and group dynamics and rural insularity to what was happening. And I couldn't make it small. That's the thing. Every individual piece of this story has a rational explanation. The coffee at Ruth's, lucky guess. Marlene's recognition, family resemblance. The Christmas cards, a persistent eccentric. The quilt, a cultural tradition. The mailbox, someone who checked county records and saw my work schedule. Each piece is explicable, but the whole is not. The whole, the patience, the consistency. The 42 letters, the waiting, the mailbox appearing at precisely the right time. The whole describes something that operates on a scale of intention and persistence that I cannot map onto normal human behavior. Not because it's supernatural, because it's too organized, too coherent, too willing to spend decades on a single outcome. I'm a planner. I understand systems, and what I saw in Furnace Creek was a system so deeply embedded in its own logic that it had become indistinguishable from the landscape itself. It didn't need to force anything. It just needed to exist, consistently in the same place, running the same processes, until the right person arrived. And the right person was always going to arrive, because the system was patient enough to wait for probability to do its work. It's 2026 now. I'm 44. I still live in Lancaster. I still work for the Regional Planning Commission, and 3 times a year I drive Route 78 for work. I have not gone back to Furnace Creek, but the mailbox is still there. I check it every time I pass. There's always something inside. A note from June, a photograph of the valley, once a hand-drawn map of the community, every house, every building, every path, with one structure circled in red and labeled, in neat handwriting, the exterior office. Last year, I met someone, a woman named Claire. She's good. We're good. In February, she told me she's pregnant. I haven't told her about Furnace Creek, but last week, I was in the attic looking for a box of old tax records, and I found something I don't remember putting there. A quilt, hand-stitched, the same pattern as the one Sarah and I received in 2009, but smaller, baby-sized. There was a note pinned to it, for the little one. The creek is beautiful in spring. We'd love for you to visit. The function is patient. June. I don't know how it got in my attic. I don't know when it was placed there. The house was locked. Nothing was disturbed, but it was there, folded neatly, as if it had always been there, waiting for the moment it became relevant. I haven't told Claire. I haven't called the police. I haven't done anything because there is nothing to report. A quilt is not a threat. A note is not a crime. A community that remembers you is not an emergency. But I've started to notice something about myself that scares me more than anything in Furnace Creek ever did. When I drive 78 now, I slow down at the junction. Every time. And the slowing has gotten longer. The first time, it was a glance. Now it's a full stop. I sit at that junction with the engine idling, and I look down the road into the hollow, and I feel something that I can only describe as recognition. Not of the place. I've never lived there. I have no memories there. Recognition of the shape of my own life, the geography degree, the planning career, the preference for rural systems, the inability to leave this region, the failed marriage to a woman who wanted a city, the gravitational pull toward a part of the state I have no rational reason to care about. My father said the system doesn't coerce, it clarifies. I'm starting to understand what he meant. And 2 nights ago, I had a thought that I have not been able to get rid of. It came to me at 3 in the morning while Claire was asleep beside me and I was staring at the ceiling. The thought was this: my child is going to be born in Ohio. My child is going to grow up near roads I drive. My child is going to hear me talk about rural communities and county infrastructure and the way small places sustain themselves across generations. And one day, my child is going to find a map, the way I did, the way my father warned me not to. And my child is going to see a road, and someone patient, June, or June's daughter, or June's granddaughter, is going to be standing at the end of it with a cup of coffee and a familiar smile. And the function will still be open, and the space will still pull. And I am going to tell my child not to take that road. I'm going to use the same words my father used, in the same tone, with the same absolute certainty. And it will work for a while. I don't have a conclusion. I don't have an ending. That's the point. This doesn't end. It just continues, one generation at a time, patient and quiet and certain. like a creek wearing through stone. If you live in southeastern Ohio, you probably know a place like Furnace Creek. Maybe not by that name, but you know the feeling. A community that's been there so long it seems less like a group of people and more like a feature of the land itself. A place that doesn't chase, doesn't threaten, just exists in the same spot, running the same patterns, waiting for the right person to feel the pull and turn off the highway. I haven't turned yet, but I slow down every time. And the slowing gets longer, and somewhere in a hollow in Morgan County, a woman I've met exactly once is setting a place at a table, and she is in absolutely no hurry at all.